Yeah, so Papert, so he's got a couple of great books. Mindstorms is fun, and that's the one he wrote not long after he started doing this, and so he was still young and fiery, and he thought everything was going to work out right. And then he's got another great one called The Children's Machine, which he wrote decades later when he found out all the stuff that went wrong. They're both great books. Um, but he talks about having, taught this way for decades in the classroom. And one of the cool things about logo, about motion, is you get a lot of kids working together that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see working together on programming. I mean, in this modern world of ours, if you say, oh, you're teaching programming to kids, and you imagine the guy who's going to be front center, front row, sitting like this, like, yes, this is my thing. And okay, yeah, I mean that kid, sure, he tends to enjoy it. Um, what's interesting when Papert's telling these stories is he's got that kid and he kind of figures it out. And if you work at it for a while, that kid figures out that some of the other kids have a sense of flash and showmanship and motion that he doesn't. Like that
Mhm.
kid, okay, he's got the math, he's got the programming, and suddenly he realizes, but like these other people who aren't supposed to be as good as me, they're making stuff that's better than me. What's going on? And he talks about a wonderful cooperation between that kid, effectively, and a guy who's a dancer, a guy who's not a tremendous programmer, but he's a dancer and he has a natural sense of motion. And so when you hand him a programming language that is all about where you move, he can figure out what's graceful. And these two kids basically getting together and managing to put all of that together.
Yeah.
And when you have a programming language with a strong sense of body and geometric intuition, like these things can happen.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's important for later in life. I think the whole teamwork aspect of these things is critically important for being successful in careers. And having had twins, it was really interesting to see how, even though they're twins, they're vastly different in understanding and application and things like that. But they were able to pool those talents to produce very remarkable things, and that was really interesting to get to see that develop through their childhood, firsthand. And I think that's kind of what some of what you're talking on with those stories is how these different talents that different people have can come together and make basically synergize to 2 + 2 = 12.
Yeah, a lot of the kind of right wrong paradigm, we have a specific thing we're doing, we're going to grade you on how fast you get through it in school. It does really limit collaboration
Hmm.
because when your goals are really tight and really prescribed, yeah, like it seriously limits collaboration.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in the second book, in the Children's Machine, Papert sort of talks about the immune system of the educational system and how it worked to prevent actual learning happening. For a little while, he could have the computer in the back of the room, and you had a bunch of kids who would just like mess with it and mess with it and mess with it and learn some really interesting stuff. And eventually, the classroom was able to build a computing curriculum and separate all the computers into the computer lab so you couldn't touch them most of the time and give you a set of specific limited tasks so you didn't learn too much.
Hmm. Yeah,
um,
and I think a lot of us that homeschool have that kind of sense of, we still see that limitation a lot in the public schools, and we think that there's better ways to instruct and broaden children's minds and get them to understand things that are going to help them in the world rather than just what are going to help them pass a test.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at Silicon Valley and the people who found the big companies, if you go back to like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs era, they're dropouts. They're
Hmm.
people that have some university that stopped partway through. There's a wonderful satire version of a Steve Jobs commencement speech where
Hmm.
he basically says, "Oh yes, looking out at all of you, it's too late for you. You've already graduated. None of you are going to be people who found the big companies.
Right.
There's still time for some people, just not you." Uh,
Right.
and in the same way, if you look at like Google and the newer generation, um, they're not necessarily dropouts, but they're all from non-traditional schools. They're from Waldorf schools. They're from Montessori schools. They're from these things that do not do the more standard educational curriculum.
Right.
And so not only do you see things like somewhere between 25 and 50% of Montessori graduates go on to become entrepreneurs and found their own business, but also a lot of the most successful businesses are founded by these folks.
Hmm.
Um, on the one hand, it does not prepare you to be an employee, and on the other hand, there are some pluses to that.
Well, yeah, I think it's a difference in thinking paradigms. Like school teaches you rote thinking, just repetitive, this is how I do it thinking, whereas these other kinds of education teach you, here's a problem, figure out some way to fix it. And that's what you need in a career, because especially in a development career. And that's why I think that these two concepts work really well together, because in a development career, the whole point is, here's a problem, figure out some way to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and I'd go even farther, because being an employee, you say it's what you want for a career. A lot of the friction I often have with jobs in general. I mean, I love Shopify. Shopify is one of the better places I've ever worked. But in general, a lot of the friction I have is because so much of a career is about gaming the rules. It is about having strong constraints. If you do something that is considered beyond your purview, if you do something that's beyond your role, they don't say, "Oh, wow, you understand even better. You're doing fabulous things that are far beyond it." They go, "No, we gave you a job and you're screwing it up. What's wrong with you, man?
Right.
Did we tell you to make a business relationship with another company? No, we told you to debug this code. The code's not
Right.
debugged. What's wrong?"
You're messing up my fief here.
Just so. And when I say that it's not necessarily doing a good job of teaching you the skills that you need to be an employee, what I mean is a sense of perspective is a massive liability for most people in most situations.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as the companies get bigger, because they get more bureaucratic and more people are worried about their little area, their little tower, and that doesn't encourage a lot of out of box thinking. And what you start seeing is the companies that do encourage this out of the box thinking, like companies like 3M, or who was it that had the Skunk Works?
Like Lockheed or somebody.
Lockheed,
Yeah.
They come up with just amazing things. People just do absolutely amazing things, and most of them are things that they were not tasked with doing.
Well, the thing about a Skunk Works is that they're doing an interesting, different trick there, where they understand that mostly what they do doesn't work for creativity. And so they specifically draw a big box around it and say, the rest of the company who are toxic to creativity, nobody touch the stuff in this box.
Right.
Didn't Steve Jobs, when he was designing something, take the team off site? I can't remember what product
Apple
it
II.
was. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he's
think it
like,
was
all right,
Apple
we're
II.
gonna remove ourselves from the machine.
Yeah. Well, that was back when he was dictatorial enough that he could just steal a bunch of the best people from every other project that was going on, but not when he was so established that he could just do that and they'd let him. That was essentially the sort of thing he got fired for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, and again, it's the same thing, right? Like, the problem with doing things much better than anybody else does is almost by definition you break structure and offend people.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.